Hi everybody. Every time I teach a live business writing class, I get the best questions, including in class yesterday. So I thought I'd start sharing these real life struggles with writing with you. And this is one of my favorite questions, and you know what? You might be surprised how common it is. So many people ask me, do I need to write like my boss? Even if I suspect maybe their writing style isn't the best. This is a super common question, and if you think about your boss and how they learned to write in their way, they probably got it from their boss too, right? So we end up kind of emulating, sort of not copying, but adopting someone's style because we think, well, that must be the right way to write. But if you've got the instinct that maybe you're writing in a way that has some good reasons behind it, let's talk about it, because you should not always write like your boss. So the short answer, maybe not much of a surprise, but it depends on how your boss writes, right? Just because they're your boss and they may know more about the topic in which you work doesn't mean that they have the right writing instincts, because again, they learned from other people too. And there are some difficult habits out there. Most of us learned from school to show what you know. And even if that was a long time ago, we're still thinking that's what writing is for. That could have happened to your boss. Often we'll find that a supervisor might try their best to write in a really explanatory way, but that's actually longer than a lot of readers want today. So trust your instincts in many cases. What are we going to look at here? What you can consider when you're deciding whether to write like your boss, and then some tips for team members and some tips for supervisors about how to model the best kind of writing for today's readers. All right, so these are the three areas in which I get the most questions or worries from students in my business writing classes at companies and public sector organizations too, and even around the world. Often people are asking the same questions, same worries. First one being, hey, my supervisor writes in a way that sounds traditional and fairly bureaucratic. Does that mean I should too? Once again, your supervisor maybe learned from reading policies and procedures when they first got the job and other types of documentation, and maybe they felt pressured to sort of imitate that type of writing. Often, we'll find supervisors have developed that habit of writing in a way that can sound a little bureaucratic. Or maybe it's you, right? Maybe you're the one that has a more bureaucratic sound. This usually happens when either you're trying very hard to be formal and correct, or when you've studied in an area like the sciences and social sciences, which use a lot of passive voice. So maybe the two of you have different levels of bureaucraties. I would go with whoever is writing less like a bureaucratic sound, right? More like a human sound. Whether it's you or your boss, that's the person to imitate. Today's readers want authenticity. They want plain, simple words. We are all busy. No one has time to figure out bureaucraties. All right, second difference, the amount of information that you like to provide or your supervisor likes to provide might be different. How are you going to decide who's right here? It's always going to depend on who's going to read it. So even if your supervisor always writes an essay in an email, or always just says, here's a follow-up, and says very little, you're going to want to gauge that yourself based on what your actual reader needs. And maybe you are going to write less than your boss has, or maybe you're going to write more. Last thing to consider, and this is big, try to learn about where your supervisor has worked in the past. Maybe they've been with your company or organization for a while. Maybe they've even been in that industry for a while. Industries have habits. When I work with people from different industries, I can very much see maybe I'm working with water utilities and they write to the public, and then I'm working with a legal group who writes to corporations. The language changes a lot. So consider, where is your boss coming from in terms of their culture of their industry? And maybe they developed habits there that are or are not right for the current situation. So what can you do if you're a team member? I'm going to advocate, and I know this can be tough because the very, very most common question I get about this is my boss wants to use flowery words, and I was thinking I was supposed to be clear and simple. If you are being clear and simple, keep on doing it, right? Readers today don't want the flowery words or the long explanations. So if you have the instinct, I'm going to use words like we would use in real life, keep doing it. Okay, so if you're learning those sort of more modern ideas in a way, because in the past, the traditional forms of writing were a little more bureaucratic. In the more modern world, we're seeing a lot more word choice based on what's right for the readers. Not based on what's been the tradition, but what's right for people now, because readers are not just trying to read the information you give them, they're trying to use it. It has to be digestible and usable. And if you're a supervisor, what can you do to help your team members write for today's readers? Do your best to model a clear way of writing with simple words. Typically, when any of us start using a fancier vocabulary, it's often because we're nervous or insecure that we are not fitting in or sounding high level enough. You don't want your team members to feel like that and start using huge vocab that people today don't really want to read. So do your best to model using clear, simple words. If they see from the leadership that it's okay to write in this clear, simple way, they won't feel the pressure to write in a more sort of ostentatious or showy way. And secondly, model caring for your reader. Show in your writing that you have not centered yourself all the time. This can mean less I language and more we language, and it can also mean what I call info inversion. Instead of writing what's most important in your mind and then going through the steps, start with what you imagine to be most important in your reader's mind, and then go through the steps in the order they would need them. So we're taking our writer's logic, but inverting the order to go with the reader's logic. Here's a really simple example of that. I'm in California. If I wanted to write a report on the consequences of climate change, I would probably put wildfires at the top. If I'm sending my report, though, to readers in Florida, I'm going to maybe do a reorg and put hurricanes at the top. So we are modeling that care for readers by always leading with what readers care about. And that's a great habit for your team to pick up. Thanks so much. Let me know if you have questions. I'd love to hear your comments.